Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 10. As promised, at the end of last week's class, quite a few people expressed the same sentiment, which is going through Tanya. The Tanya is the ideas, the foundational ideas that we've been learning are foundational, but there's also quite a bit of dense concepts to get through as you learn through Tanya. And I will say that's very much by design. And as we are renewing the daily chapter of Tanya, the daily reading, I should say, the daily paragraph that works on a schedule, that every single day there's a few lines of Tanya that we learn. So we're once again starting over, and so we're once again reading the introduction. The Alter Rebbe wrote his own introduction to the Tanya. And so I'll reiterate that what the Alter Rebbe says, which essentially boils down to the fact that the Tanya is a book which every single Jewish person can learn and grow from, just like meeting a mentor, meeting a Rebbe, meeting someone to get advice about a service of God is a personal experience. The Tanya is designed to be a personal experience as well. But that means that no matter what level we're holding at, there is that same personal experience. And that's, in my humble opinion, why we relearn it every year. It's because when you relearn it, you're not learning the same lines again. It's not, just repeating the exact same thing again and again. It's every year we understand on a deeper level, and we understand a more abstract, we understand something more. Every time we learn the Tanya, we learn something. So we can extrapolate from that this is our first time going through Tanya. And so it's okay if we just, as we go through the chapters, if the big ideas stick with us, even if a lot of the nuances and a lot of the small ideas, not small is insignificant, but small is in minor points to the Alter Rebbe's greater point, they're okay if we leave them for now. We don't let that distract us or take away from our understanding of the general ideas that the Alter Rebbe is teaching us. And so as we start chapter 10, I want to summarize what we've been learning the last 9 chapters. And essentially, on a very, very, if we had to sum it up in 2 sentences, what the Tanya is introducing us is to the battle of the souls. The Alter Rebbe spends a few chapters describing the godly soul. The Alter Rebbe spends another few chapters describing the animal soul. And we'll get into a second what exactly that means and what they are and what they want. And then last week we spoke about the face-off, how they clash and what that looks like in our lives. And of course, everything we discuss is going to be a summary, so I highly encourage on our YouTube channel, Chabad Learning Center, to go back and learn these chapters again and review them. But the Alter Rebbe starts off by introducing us to the godly soul. And by the godly soul, we mean literally a piece of God. Now, how does God have pieces and all of those exciting esoteric questions? We discussed some of them. We said some of them we can understand later. But generally speaking, we have a piece of God within us, just like a child has a quote-unquote piece of the parents, their DNA within them. So too, we have a piece of God within us. Now, that piece of God constantly wants to reconnect. It has one goal in life, and that is it wants to reunite with its source and go back to home.
We're just talking about Jews?
Yeah, so this idea is explicitly about Jews, as we discussed at length on Tuesday night, about what exactly the role and the place of non-Jews. Every human was created in God's image, but of course, as God's chosen people, as God's children, we have a special place within that general plan. And the godly soul within us wants to reconnect and reunite with God. Now, how does that happen? The Alter Rebbe spent a few chapters describing how that happens through doing mitzvos and learning Torah. By the act of doing a mitzvah, as much as it seems like it's the lowest possible thing to do, I'm taking a piece of leather and strapping it to my hand. I'm taking a lump of wax and lighting it at what happens to be the right moment on Friday night or Friday afternoon. The idea is that because I'm doing God's will, God has built that action as a bridge that we can reconnect with Him and connect with Him, and that is what is accomplished by doing a mitzvah and learning Torah, and that is all the godly soul wants to do. Its entire world and its entire mission in life is to connect to God. On the other hand, we have the animal soul. And the animal soul, as we explained at length, is not necessarily evil. It's not bad. It doesn't want wicked. It wants selfish things. It's an animal. An animal will always look out for itself first. It always will follow its nature. It will always follow its training. It will always follow, where can I get the next snack? It's not bad. I don't know if there's any pet lovers around here at the table, but I don't want to call animals bad. But animals are not. Animals are just very much trained to serve themselves. What they want, what they need, that's what they do. Nothing else, nothing beyond. And that is what our animal soul also wants naturally. It wants its own pleasures, it wants its own. Now, again, that doesn't have to necessarily mean the most decadent, evil sins. It just, if the animal soul wants to continue living, it's going to want food. And the animal soul wants to be healthy, so it's going to want healthy food. All of those don't change the fact that the reason why it wants it is for selfish reasons. And the reason why that's a problem for the godly soul is because being holy is a zero-sum game. You're either holy, you're either with God and for God and about God, or you're not. And so everything in our life has that question. And when we're talking about we're talking about things that are sins, the question doesn't even start, because there is no way for that to be godly, because it's not possible. God has tied that up. The Hebrew word asur, which means forbidden, literally means tied up. God has tied that up. It's chained. There is no way for that to be used for godliness, and therefore that conversation doesn't even start.
Where's the good and the bad inclination come in?
That's what we're building to. That's what we're building to. That's what we discussed at length last week, and we're discussing what does the good inclination want and what does the bad inclination want. So the bad inclination wants.
Wait, is that divided between the spiritual soul and the animals?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I'll circle around to that. The animal soul, right? So the animal soul wants selfish things. And the problem for the godly soul is that if it's not for God, then it's inherently unholy. Again, not bad. It could be allowed, yet not holy. And what happens is that suddenly every single thing, a cup of coffee, a bottle of water, a table, a phone, a piece, everything in our life that we're allowed to have, we have that question. Right? So we have the two extremes. If it's forbidden, it's definitely not godly. If it's a mitzvah, it's definitely godly. Eating on Shabbat is a mitzvah, it's definitely godly. But there's most of our life is this gray area. Things that are allowed, but not a mitzvah. And the Alter Rebbe discusses at length about how even those things, if we want it to be for the godly soul, if we want them to be used by the godly soul, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, then it has to be done for God. Yes, you can have the most luxurious steak and wine dinner. The question is, why are you having it? If you're having it because you wanted it, that's great. It's allowed. You said a blessing. Kudos to you. But it's not holy. And if it's not holy, if it's not for God, then it's unholy.
So you sit down for dinner. How do you make it holy?
How do you make it holy is you think to yourself for a second, why am I eating this dinner? Why? What is the reason why? If I'm just doing it because I'm hungry, it's for me, it's not for God. But if you're doing it because my body's hungry because I have to eat, that way I have energy to go on and pray, or go on to learn Torah, or go on to continue living in God's world, then it's holy. And as Alter Rebbe explained, because it's untied, it's mutar, which means allowed, but also means untied, it can fluctuate. I can start off by eating dinner for my own selfish reasons, and then say, you know what? Let me go use that energy to go do something positive. Or more generally, when I do teshuvah, I return to God and I say, you know, my previous version of me, I would say 1.0, but all of us are way past version 1.0 of ourselves at this point, right? That version of me, I want to grow, I want to become a better person. We transition to a new reality through teshuvah, and now all of those things that we didn't necessarily utilize in the best way are now uplifted, and now the reason why they're fighting over it, right? What are they fighting over? And we explained this a little bit, but I think it's an important time right now to express this, is what they're fighting over is the godly spark that is within anything. Let's use this cup of coffee. In this cup of coffee is water and residue from ground beans, but there's also a godly spark, godly energy that is making this exist. Everything that exists is because God is currently making it exist. And so because of that, there's a godly energy in this. That we refer to as the godly spark. That godly spark can be extracted. When I'm consuming this, that godly spark is extracted into one of two camps. It's either uplifted back to its source, back to God, back to holiness, or it's trapped. It's downgraded. It becomes part of the other side. It's called Sitra Achra, the other side, the camp that opposes God. That tug of war is the premise of the fight between the godly soul and the animal soul. What am I going to do? And that's not only this cup of coffee, but every action that I do, every thought that I have is the same thing, because the neutral territory is me. I am the battlefield. Me, my conscious self, the thoughts that I have, the speech that I say, the actions that I do, the emotions that I have. All of those are neutral territory. And they can be used for positive, or they could be used, we'll see, I'll change it a little bit. They could be used for godly, or they could be used for ungodly. And so the animal soul wants everything to be used for selfish purposes, for ungodly purposes, for unholy purposes. Again, not bad purposes necessarily. It includes bad purposes because the animal soul, especially once it gets more and more coarse and less sensitive to spirituality, to him it's all the same. I want. I don't care if it's allowed or not allowed. But it's not inherently bad. It just is selfish. The godly soul is inherently godly. It wants everything to be for God and about God. And so, as we explained at length in chapter 9, this is the battle of our life. As we go through life and as we have these two inclinations, as Len just called them, I have my evil inclination, or my selfish inclination that wants me to do things that are against God, and I have my good inclination that wants me to do things that are good and holy and positive and for God. What are they fighting over? They are fighting over control of me. I am, as the Alter Rebbe described, quoting from earlier sources, the parable of a city. There's one city and there are two kings constantly fighting over control of the city. I am that city and the two kings are my two souls. Every action that I do, every thought that I have, every speech that I say, it's all up for grabs. At every moment, I'm faced with a choice. When I drink this cup of coffee, am I drinking it because it's for a godly reason, so I can stay up and drive safely, or I can have energy and lubrication while I talk and give a Torah class, or do I really enjoy the taste, and that's why I'm drinking it?
No, a tzaddik does not have this battle, right? You took it with the benefit.
So here's where Len, as always, is in tune with what we're talking about. What's the outcome of this battle? Right? We know that there's a fight going on. We know this battle. What are the outcomes? And as the Alter Rebbe is going to explain, starting in chapter 10, then 11, then 12, there are three possible outcomes of this war. Chapter 10 is going to give the outcome of a tzaddik, of a righteous person. Chapter 11 will give the outcome of a rasha, a quote-unquote wicked person. And then chapter 12 will start from there to the end of the Tanya. We'll be discussing at length the middle outcome, the outcome of a Beinoni. And I'll summarize quickly so that we're all on the same page about what these outcomes are. A tzaddik emerges victorious. A tzaddik, the righteous within him, the godly soul, is the winner. But here's an important distinction. Because the battle that they're having is not just a battle for right now, and they could coexist, or I'll take today, you take tomorrow. It's, as we just said, this is a zero-sum game. For the godly soul to win, the animal soul has to cease to exist. It can no longer be a factor. It can no longer be threatening the city. I mean, this is something that the Holy Land of Israel is struggling to learn for itself. It's not called winning if your enemy is still a threat. And so in this chapter, we're talking about the tzaddik ending, the possible scenario where it's a tzaddik, where he completely vanquishes the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the animal soul. It's a complete victory. We'll discuss even within complete victory there are gradations, but there is no longer, the animal soul is no longer a factor. The rasha fails. The rasha, who wins? The animal soul. Everything is about himself, everything is about selfishness, and the problem is, as we described, that sometimes, right now, my battle could be over a cup of coffee.
No,
the problem
isn't necessarily evil.
Russia is not evil, but a rasha, which starts off by the animal soul wins, now it's just about a cup of kosher coffee. But the more power, the more stronger the animal soul gets, the more coarse it gets, and the less sensitive it gets to the details. And suddenly, today it's about kosher coffee, tomorrow it's about non-kosher coffee, and the next day it's about even something worse. And that is, and I'm saying it in 3 days, these can happen over eons. And that's why, going back to one final point in our summary of the first 9 chapters, you could really ask yourself, who cares? If the Torah tells me I'm allowed to have this cup of coffee, okay, it's unholy. I'm not a tzaddik. Not every moment of my life is going to be holy. Why is it something to work towards to make it holy? It's allowed. It's not wrong. It's not an aveira. It's not a sin. But the answer is that, again, it's one or the other. If the animal soul wins, now it's stronger. The animal soul is stronger and the godly soul is weaker. And as that balance continues to shift, suddenly it's not about kosher coffee. Suddenly it's about something far worse. God forbid, until serving idol worship. That's the Talmud describes about the animal soul, about the Yetzer Hara. Today he tells you do something like this, small. Tomorrow he tells you more, until eventually he tells you go serve Avodah Zarah. You might think to yourself, I'll never serve Avodah Zarah. And you're right, you never would. But the version of you with a much, much stronger animal soul, because it's been successful and it's been winning all these campaigns for so many years, that version of you might fail. And that is where we are today. Now I will say chapter 10, of all the chapters that we're learning, I would say chapter 10 is probably going to feel the least relevant. And the reason why I say that is because this book, the Tanya as it's known, has another name. The Tanya's other name is Sefer Shel Beinonim.
What is it?
Sefer Shel Beinonim, the book of intermediaries, right? And what does that mean? It means this is a book geared towards the Beinoni. Because we didn't yet describe the ending of Beinoni. We described the tzaddik, the evil, the holy side wins. The Rasha, the wicked side wins. The Beinoni is a lifelong struggle. The Beinoni is that seesaw. There's constant temptation, but never action. I always have those temptations. I always have those wants, right? And as we'll see now, the tzaddik gets rid of those temptations, gets rid of those desires, we'll call them. It no longer desires things that the animal soul desires.
Did the Alter Rebbe consider himself a Benoni or a tzaddik?
The Alter Rebbe doesn't talk to himself in this book. He's talking to us. From tradition, we know that the Alter Rebbe was what we would call a tzaddik. And as we'll discuss today at length, the role of a tzaddik is different from the role of a Beinoni. And people are born to be a tzaddik. And ultimately, which is why, coming back to my point, how this chapter is going to seem the least relevant. Because what the Alter Rebbe is describing about completely vanquishing the desires within us doesn't seem obtainable to us. It doesn't seem like this is our goal, and it's not. As we'll see over the next few chapters, our role in life, unless anyone's a tzaddik, and if so, please let me know, because you can't attend this class. There's a different book, the Sefer Shel Tzadikim, which was so holy and so thing that it actually got burnt. We don't have it anymore, because it's not talking to the common folk. It didn't deserve. It wasn't right for it to be in circulation. This book is talking to the struggler, the Beinoni, the intermediary, which starting in chapter 12 would describe in length what exactly that looks like. Because even the intermediary, even the Beinoni, the moment we sin, God forbid, we become a Rasha in that moment. And so the Beinoni is sort of this middle ground where the action is completely clear. But the temptation, the desire is always there. And that's sort of that struggle of every day you wake up and you have that struggle. And I don't know about everyone around the table, but that definitely describes my day. Every day is a struggle.
Just a few minutes ago, you said that people are born to be a tzaddik. Now, are you saying in general, is that everybody has the opportunity to be a tzaddik? Or are you saying that some people, the few limited people on this earth, are actually born to be a tzaddik? Which way?
Very limited people are born, and their life plan, right? Everyone's born with a life plan, with a life mission. Their life journey is that when they have the ability, they have the inspiration to accomplish what we're talking about in chapter 10. Okay. Most of us are not, because the idea of everyone being a tzaddik, and I'll get back to this at the end of the chapter about why this isn't relevant to most of us. If everyone was a tzaddik, then God's whole purpose of creating the world would cease to exist. Because the whole idea of a tzaddik is they don't have the temptations of the world around them. They've quashed it, it's gone.
When Mashiach comes, will we all be tzaddik?
Yes, because when Mashiach comes, the whole other side will no longer be a factor.
Yeah, but he's not here yet.
He is not here yet.
And you hear all the time about people are born, everybody is born with the same thing called freedom of choice.
Yes.
You can take the right road or the wrong road.
Yes. Now, what those roads lead to are different for every person. And the tzaddik is still a person, as holy as they are. Lisa, I'll start talking really loud for you.
Okay, yes, please.
A
I'll get into a microphone.
Perfect. A tzaddik is still a person, and we will see from different quotes about tzaddikim that they also had to work on themselves. That they weren't born like this, but they have the ability that their story ends like this. Most of us don't. And so now you might ask yourself, okay, so why do we learn in this chapter? If it's not relevant to us, why did the Alter Rebbe stick it into the Sefer Shel Beinonim? If the whole premise of the book is talking to us strugglers, then why tempt us, why tease us with this description of what a tzaddik looks like? And so, on the basic level, of course, We have to know the facts. We discussed the battle. In chapter 9, we discussed the war. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to give us the three possible outcomes that could be. Just because it doesn't apply to us doesn't mean it's true. But on a deeper level, the commentaries, the Hasidic masters explain that the tzaddik represents completion in these ideas. But we can have these ideas in an incomplete form. We can vanquish our temptation to a certain thing. Have we vanquished all of our temptations? No. That's not the job, that's not the life of a Beinoni. But we could experience this in some level. And as we learn through the chapter, these ideas are going to seem extreme. And they're going to seem perfect and pure, which they are. But it doesn't mean it's not relevant to us. The Alter Rebbe is going to talk about two levels of loving God. You love God so much that you don't desire anything that's against God. And then an even more higher level, you love God so much that you're disgusted by things that are opposed to God. Right? That's two levels of love. That's two levels of the connection and of the eradication of evil that we can have. Well, not we, but that a tzaddik can have. Now, a tzaddik represents the completion in all of their life and everything they do. They have one of these two levels.
There's no battle within a tzaddik.
The battle is different. The battle becomes a battle for how much they can accomplish. It's a battle more on the positive rather on the negative. They're not avoiding things. There's a struggle still to grow. As we'll see, even tzaddik is not a monolith. The idea of a tzaddik, there's many, many levels of how far this love goes, which we'll discuss as we continue in the chapter. But the idea that a tzaddik is someone who developed this love so strongly in every part of their life, that's what makes them a tzaddik. But in our life, we can also develop these feelings. It won't be as complete. It will have, waves up and down. But this tells us what these feelings look like. What does it mean to love God? A tzaddik in every area of his life is like this. For us, the strugglers, we can have this in some parts of our life. And for us, as the Alter Rebbe is going to discuss in the chapters 20 in the 20s, as we go through life and we struggle, we're fighting for every inch of ground, right? Because every day we wake up and the enemy is still sieging the city. Yes, the godly soul is in actual control. The godly soul actually controls my action, but the animal soul is right there waiting at the gates, ready to attack. And because of that, when we recognize what the tzaddik experiences, when we can bring that into our life a little bit in one area, in one piece of our life, that could be life-changing for us as well. And so with that, we'll get into the content of chapter 2, of chapter 10, which it actually starts on page 2, because there's an introduction there. Again, these copies from Chabad.org, a great resource for recordings and reviews, etc. But we're in the chapter 1, very, very beginning of Tanya, right? The first half of chapter 1 was establishing the premise of this entire book. And that is that there are various levels of connection to God. There is the tzaddik, the righteous person, the rasha, the wicked person, and the Beinoni, the intermediary. But even within that, the Alter Rebbe, all the way back in chapter 1, used really that there are 5. There is the complete tzaddik, the incomplete tzaddik, the Beinoni, the complete rasha, and the incomplete rasha. And so now we're going to understand what makes a tzaddik, what is a tzaddik. So, our initial thought is a tzaddik, a righteous person, someone who does mostly good, right? On Judgment Day, God willing, after 120 years, after a long and successful life, on Judgment Day, we're judged based on the majority of our actions. So a tzaddik, you would think, is someone who did pretty well. Most of their deeds were good. But as the Alter Rebbe established and proved in chapter 1, that can't be what it is. A tzaddik is something more. And now is when we finally get that answer. What is a tzaddik? Is someone who the battle that we described in chapter 9 is over. They won the war. And this is on page 2 in our booklet. V'hine, kisha'adam magber nafshe elikus. When a person causes his divine soul to prevail over the animal soul. V'nilchem kol kach im habahamis, ad shemegarish umaver harashiba michal hasmali. When he wages war against the animal soul to the extent that he banishes and eradicates its evil from its abode within him, namely the left part of the heart. as we discussed at length last week, how the method of the animal soul is emotions first, which in our blood circulatory system represents the cycle of the blood starting in the heart. How the blood is pumped from the heart all over our body, including the head, which that starts in the left ventricle. Now, spiritually speaking, practically there's no soul hiding in our left or right ventricle. But what it means is that it's an emotion first operation. Where does the godly soul live? Mainly in our head, because everything starts, for the godly soul, everything starts with an intellectual understanding of the abstract. It quickly moves to the right ventricle. The right ventricle is where the blood goes after it's been to the head. It ends up in the right ventricle. And that's where the sort of the godly soul, quote unquote, lives. That's what its operating is. It starts in the head and goes, there's still emotion, there's still passion, there's still love, there's still fear, there's still excitement, but that's the right ventricle. That's after it's been to the head, that's where the story is. So this tzaddik, he's fought so long and so successfully that he has completely banished the animal soul.
What's the purpose of relating it to the body?
There is a verse that says, Mifsarai echze eleika. From my flesh, I perceive God. All of these ideas are very abstract. All of these ideas, we're talking about godly souls and animal souls. And so by bringing it into the body, by bringing it into, throughout Kabbalah and Hasidic thought, we always bring it back to the body. Because our body is a thing that, especially the doctors among us, are most intimately familiar with, in the sense that we know how it works. We can experience certain things in our body, and therefore it helps us relate to abstract concepts. It doesn't need to be. It's not depending, and it's not it's not because of the fact that our body's this way. That's why our souls are this way. Much to the contrary. But it helps us relate to these ideas. And if anyone was struggling with this process of what goes where and what goes first and what comes second, the Alter Rebbe gives this helpful analogy to explain it. And as we go through, we'll have quite a few opportunities to discuss this idea of where in our own body, the concept of the 10 sephiros, the emotions, all of those mirror God, and our body are mirrored. So this person, he waged war against the animal soul to the extent that he banishes and eradicates it from its abode within him, namely the left part of the heart. As it is written, and you shall eradicate the evil from your midst. Now that's talking about, literally, there's wicked people living amongst the Jewish people. We have to get rid of them. We can't allow wickedness and evil to exist amongst the Jewish people. But as the translation continues, which implies that we ought to eradicate the evil within himself. We cannot just, I won't say we cannot because this is our reality, but the tzaddik does not allow the evil to just exist. It's completely banished, it's gone, it's no longer a factor. Now, when we're talking about banishing an enemy, there are two ways that can happen. One is that the enemy is vanquished. You conquered them, they're gone, they're never a factor in your life anymore.
Talk about external enemy in us.
Both. We'll talk about, I'll use the external first so we can relate to it, and then I'll translate it to ourselves. The first way is that the enemy no longer attacks us. We've bombed them, we've destroyed them, they no longer attack us. You've won, they're gone. But back in their hidey holes, back in their cave, mountaintop caves, they still exist. They can't attack you. You've completely destroyed any ability they have to be a factor in your life. You've won, but they still exist. They're not a factor in your life, but they still exist. Another way is that you've completely transformed them, and this is, I think, a little bit harder to understand in the external wars that we have, because external wars, usually people don't come over that easy. But I think in medieval times this was more common. You conquer an army, you'd conquer a troop, and they would become folded into your army. And sort of people were much more, I think, fluid about their allegiances. And so when you won, all right, now all the forces you've captured now work for you. They're your slaves, they're your troops. That's how it used to work. And that's the second level. Not only do you conquer them and destroy them, you've transformed them. And that is going to be the two levels of the complete tzaddik and the incomplete tzaddik. The complete tzaddik transformed the evil within him. It no longer exists because now it's positive. The incomplete tzaddik won, They're not faced with the temptations, but the evil is still there. Now, how does a tzaddik know the difference? The Alter Rebbe will give us a very quick litmus test to see what level you're holding at. Continuing at the bottom of page 2, Ve'ein hara nepach lotev mamish. As to one who achieves this goal, right, the goal of that the animal soul is no longer a factor, but finds that the evil has nevertheless not actually be converted into good, in which case his entire capacity for desire would now be directed only towards good and holiness, since within him this is not the case. Nikra tzaddik f'she'ein gomer, page 3, he is called an incomplete tzaddik. You've won, but you haven't transformed. Therefore, we use the term incomplete tzaddik. Another term that the Alter Rebbe used in chapter 1, v'tzadik v'raloi d'hainu sheyesh lo adayin ma'at mizera b'chol hasmali. He is also called a tzaddik who knows evil. I use that term, tzaddik v'raloi. A tzaddik and bad is to him, tzaddik v'tovlo, a tzaddik that good is to him. What does that mean, good? So we do. Some translate that as good things happen to him, right? An imperfect tzaddik still has bad things happening in life. That way, they can pay off any debts that they have for the little bit of wrong that they've done. They have bad things happen to them to take care of it, as we explained at length in chapter 1. But here the Alter Rebbe is explaining, what does it mean, tzaddik v'ralei? A tzaddik and bad is to him, or evil is to him? It means you still have evil within you. It's completely not a factor, but it's there. In halachic, in law, in Jewish law, there is the concept of, if you have a big pot of meat stew, and a drop of milk falls inside. So milk and meat is not kosher. But if there's a small enough milk in a big enough pot of meat, it becomes nullified. Anyone know the ratio?
60 to 1.
Generally speaking, it's 60 to 1. Right? 60 to 1, if there's 60 ounces of meat stew and 1 ounce of milk, you're okay. Now, is there milk in this pot? Yes. There's an undeniable fact. But it's so small and insignificant that it's not a factor. And that's the level of tzaddik v'ralei. Yes, he's a righteous person. He's vanquished evil, v'ralei. He's also called a tzaddik who knows evil, meaning that some vestige of evil still lingers within him in the left part of his heart. It's still there. It's so weak and defeated. It can never rise up again. It's not coming back, but it's still there. Ella, except that it finds no expression at all, not even in evil desires, because the evil, by reason of its minuteness, is subjugated and nullified by the good and cannot therefore be sensed. Right? So the practical application is, does the tzaddik experience this evil on a day-to-day basis? Again, what is the role of that evil? To tempt us to do wrong. Does the tzaddik experience it on a day-to-day basis? No. The whole thing about a tzaddik is they no longer have those temptations to do something wrong.
The role of that evil can help us understand other people around us.
Yes. What I mean in the sense of what is the role, meaning what if that evil was powerful, what would it be doing right now? If that evil, if that evil was powerful right now, if it wasn't vanquished, what would it be doing right now? It would be tempting me. Right? That's the life of a Rasha and a Beinoni, is that evil is not vanquished, and so it is tempting me. So what's happening now that it's vanquished? If it still exists, what does it mean that it's vanquished? It means that tzaddik no longer has temptation. That's no longer tempted to do anything against God, because it's completely vanquished. V'lochein, nidmelo ki v'yergesheo v'yilech kule legamri. Hence, he, the tzaddik, may imagine that he has driven it out, and that it has quite disappeared. You might think it's gone because you don't experience it anymore, but it's still there. In truth, however, had all the evil in him departed and disappeared, it would have been converted into actual good. If you are truly one, it would have now in that space there would be good. Now, the Rebbe explains that, if it's evil, how could it be good? I thought it's a zero-sum game. The Rebbe explains that the animal soul really has two parts into it. The animal soul has the way it expresses itself and what it is. We'll call it the garments of the animal soul and the animal soul itself. The animal soul itself is just a force for desire. That's what it is. It just wants. Now, the problem is, naturally, what does the animal soul want? Selfish things, because it's an animal. And therefore, everything that it experiences, it wants selfish things, it wants personal, even evil things, if that serves its selfish purposes. If you remove those clothing, if you remove all of the evil, you've completely emptied it out, what do you have remaining? Just a powerful engine. All you have now is a strong drive to do something. And as we described, the fact that we call it the animal soul is also based on the fact that it's a much more powerful drive than our own natural divine or human soul. In the sense, right, just like an animal, an ox. An ox is an incredibly powerful animal. Before it's trained, let it loose in a china shop, what's it going to do? According to them, I don't know, in actuality, don't try it, it's at home. But in theory, and what is it supposed to? It destroys everything. It runs around and destroys things. What if you tame that animal? What if you harness it? You can plow your whole field in one day. That's the power of the animal soul. So if you completely strip out all of its negative tendencies, you've transformed it to good. And suddenly, the tzaddik has a much more passionate engine to goodness. That's what we mean by saying it's transformed to good. Now, what's the practical difference? If the incomplete tzaddik, maybe it doesn't have maybe it hasn't transformed it, but it vanquished it. The evil within him is no longer a factor at all. He's never going to be faced for the rest of his life with temptation. What's the practical difference if it still exists or not? I think that, again, not being a doctor, I can't say this for sure, but I know that there's certain ideas of that there's a certain level of sickness that within the body, it's completely weakened, it's gone, it will never come back. Is it there? Yes. Your body will slowly process it out. Right? But it's still there.
Well, it's like somebody with cancer in remission.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't sure if that was factually correct. I'm glad that you said it, not me. But somebody who has cancer and it's in remission, it's there, you vanquished it. Of course, the analogy is not perfect because cancer remission is still possible to come back, and that's why there's... But in theory, it's there, it's just conquered. So what's the practical difference for this tzaddik about whether or not he vanquished the evil, whether or not he transformed the evil? The Alter Rebbe continues on page 4. Ubir ha'inyan, the explanation of the matter is as follows. Kihine tzaddik gamor shnepach harash le'letov v'lechein nikrat tzaddik v'tevloi. A complete tzaddik in whom the evil has been converted into good and who is consequently called tzaddik, a tzaddik who knows only good, who ayidei hasaras habigadim matzeim legami mahara, has attained this level by completely removing his filthy garments from evil. Right? That's the idea that we were just expressing. That transforming the evil means you've taken that ox and you've completely stripped it of all of its selfish, animalistic tendencies. So then what happens now? You're so filled with a passionate love for God. You're so filled with a strong feeling of connection to God. Dahainu limois ma'od b'tanuga elam hazeh u'lisnaig bam ta'anugais b'nei adam. This means he despises utterly the pleasures of this world, finding it repugnant to derive from them a pleasure with which other people derive. What are we saying here?
So can you be a complete tzaddik and not be a monk?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's not about what you do. It's about what feelings do you have. And that's, I think, a very important idea that the Alter Rebbe is introducing to us. We like to think of Judaism as all about what you do. And it is. On a halachic level, Judaism is about what you do. But spiritually, Kabbalah, Hasidus explain to us, it's also about what you feel. Your connection to God. How strong, how permanent, how expressive is that connection? And so because of that, I'll just finish that one more paragraph before the break. Namely, the pleasure of merely gratifying the physical appetite instead of using this pleasure towards the service of God. You have something neutral. Something that is not evil, it's just not godly. The incomplete tzaddik and the complete tzaddik will have two different reactions to it. The incomplete tzaddik the one who's not complete, will not do this. He won't just eat that steak dinner for the sake of it, because to eat it for the sake of itself is a tendency of the evil inclination of the animal soul, and he no longer has an animal soul. And therefore, he will never consume something not for the sake of God. The incomplete tzaddik, whatever they do, they're doing it for the right reasons, because they don't have an inclination to do it for the wrong reasons. They're always doing everything for God. But the idea of it standing as a neutral entity is okay by them. All right, I'm not going to use it for that reason, but you can even say, I understand where other people are coming from. I understand it. The complete tzaddik cannot understand it. They are disgusted by the idea of doing something that's not for God. They're not disgusted by doing an avera, by doing a sin. That they're definitely disgusted by. But even the idea of possibly consuming something not for God disgusts them. Why? Because when their level of connection is so prominent in their life, with no distractions, nothing taken away from it, every part of their psyche is so in tune with connecting to God, they can't possibly understand how anyone else could not live like that. There's a famous story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great Kabbalist, the author of the Zohar, was persecuted by the Roman government, and so he spent 12 years in a cave. In the cave, him and his son Elazar sat and did nothing but study Kabbalah. God made that there was a spring of water, a carob tree. They sat in this cave for 12 years learning Kabbalah. At the end of 12 years, the decree was over. The emperor had died. The death warrant was no longer in effect. And so they come out. Emerging from this 12-year exile, or whatever you want to call it, this 12-year isolation, thank you, in cocoon of holiness, they walk down the street and they see someone plowing their field. This idea was so foreign to them, was so mind-boggling to them, that the Talmud says, they looked at this person and his field with such utter disgust that it caused that there was to be a spiritual fire that burned up the whole guy's field. How could you possibly do anything neutral? Do you not know that there's God? Are you not cognizant of everything? They looked at this person plowing, the innocent guy plowing his field. But it wasn't for God. It was just a neutral person plowing their field, and that disgusted them to the extent that they caused a fire to descend from heaven and destroy it. At that moment, God said, this is not what I had in mind. Get back into the cave for another year and fix your mistake. Because that's not the world we're supposed to experience. This idea of disgust to the extent that it destroys the world around you, I created a world with neutral territory. Yes, that person, that farmer, is faced with a free choice. He's plowing his field now. What's he going to use the produce for? What's he going to use the money for? But that's his journey. And they went back into the cave and they said that after the 13th year, they came out. Rabbi Elazar was still in this state. He still couldn't fathom it. So he went around destroying things, and his father followed around fixing everything with the spiritual energy. What are we talking about here? We're talking about how hyper aware are you of godliness? How much does your life revolve around God? How important is godliness to your life? The tzaddik for Raleigh, the tzaddik that still has wickedness, it doesn't affect his life. He's never faced with temptations, but he can tolerate wickedness. That little vestige, the fact that it still exists, means he can still relate to it. He can still understand where you're coming from.
So isn't it better to be an incomplete tzaddik? It's for Judaism is supposed to perfect the world. A tzaddik who's disgusted by anybody that's not at his level, how can he influence them?
So that's a good question. If I'm so disgusted by it, how can I influence? So the role of a real tzaddik, especially a tzaddik that takes the role of a mentor, is to use that disgust and teach it to the rest of us. And that's why we're learning this chapter, even though, we're sitting here splitting hairs about, are you just disgusted, or we're talking about levels that are so beyond us. But we're supposed to take this to heart. We're supposed to, as we go through the world, things that we recognize are against God, we're supposed to develop feelings of, disgust is a pretty strong word, But we shouldn't be neutral about it. Right? If there's someone that we love incredibly dearly, and we hear someone else disparaging them, right? If our entire life is consumed with the love for that person, we can't tolerate that. We can't let that exist. We have to go and set the record straight. If we're more lukewarm to the person, even if we're completely in love with them, but it's not as intense. If I can, I have my own, yes, I love that person, but yeah, they could be annoying sometimes. Then I'm not going to go and fight with the same intensity every time someone says, oh, that person's annoying. Because I can relate to that. Yes, I'm different than you because I would never say that, I never think that, because I'm consumed with love for that person. But I can hear where you're coming from. Now, the role of a tzaddik as an influence for the rest of the world, they can't let this disgust get in their way of what they're supposed to be doing with the rest of the world. And what are they supposed to be doing? I mean, generally speaking, we know what a tzaddik is also supposed to transform the world, as we'll continue to describe in the rest of the chapter. But the idea of using that disgust to channeling it, to influence and teach the world, and the story continues. That Rabbi Shimon, who had channeled this, he was then able to use this energy. He was so apathetical. He was like an opposing magnet to anything impure, anything evil, anything wicked, that he was able to use that, what's the opposite of it? That repulsion to actually help the world. Because he was so spiritually sensitive that he was able to go, and there was this big field that was once a graveyard, and it was a big problem because people would use it for traveling, and the Kohanim, the priests, couldn't, because it was once used for a graveyard. Unless the graves are marked, going in that field causes you to become impure. A whole different discussion about the impurity of a dead body. Rabbi
Joshua said to Moses, there are people out there prophesizing.
Yeah.
And Moses said, I wish all my people would be out there prophesying.
Yeah. We're supposed, not we, the tzaddik is supposed to channel this to helping the world. So, and it's already 10:20, the time flies. So I want to, the end of this chapter, the rest of this chapter, I should say, continues along this theme of understanding the difference of what does a tzaddik accomplish and the different levels within a tzaddik. But finishing on the bottom of page 4, he despises such pleasures, right? The complete tzaddik. Why does he despise wickedness? Why does he despise anything that's against God? For they are derived and receive their spiritual substance from the klipa and sitra achra, the very antithesis to holiness. The complete tzaddik utterly hates whatever is of the sitra achra. If it's not God, it's against God, and I am repulsed. I hate it. It's horrible. Page 5. Why does that come from? Where does that strong repulsion to wickedness, to evil, to the other side come from? Because of the great intensity of the love. The greater the love, the greater the repulsion. Page 5. Because of his great love, a profound love of delights, and his superior degree of affection for God and his holiness, as mentioned above in chapter 9, where the author explains the love of delights is the ultimate level of the love of God. To resume, because of the tzaddik's great love for God and holiness, he utterly hates the klipa and sitra achra. Kiheim zeh lu'uma zeh. Since they, i.e. holiness and klipa, are antithetical, his love of God therefore evokes a commiserate degree of hatred for sitra achra. Kedechsiv tachlis sinos anesim la'oyevim hayali chakreni v'da levaviv gemer. And so it is written, I hate them with a consuming hatred, says King David of those who oppose God, and they have become enemies to me. Search me, says to God, and know my heart. What does he mean by that? He means if you search me, if you see how much love I have, you'll understand. Now, of course, here's an important factor, that no matter how much we hate evil, we have to recognize that every person is neutral. And therefore, the path of Rabbi Shimon's son, of continuing, because of his great hatred, therefore, because of his great love, he had such a great hatred that he couldn't tolerate anything else, that's not where we're supposed to be. And the idea of turning this into hatred for those who oppose God, right, as opposed to hating the sin itself, is an important factor to mention here. We're not going to get into it because it's not the topic of our conversation, but we're talking about hating evil, not hating people. Continuing at the bottom of page 5, כפי ערך גדול אהבת השם, כך ערך גדול השנאה וסטר אחרא והמיאוס ברע בתכלס. Hence, according to the abundance of love towards God, so is the extent of hatred towards the spiritual sister achra, which nurtures the physical pleasures and the utter repugnance of evil of the physical pleasure. Continuing on page 6. Why? Ki hamiusu hepach ava mamish kamei hasina. For repugnance is as much the exact opposite of love as is hatred. Right? I mean, talking within the realm of emotion. Right? That's a famous brain teaser. What's the opposite of love? What's the opposite of love?
Hate.
Hate, or is it apathy? Right? That's sort of the two ways you can go with that.
Or what?
Or apathy.
Oh.
Right? Because at least I'm feeling an emotion towards you. So the way that Chassidus understands it is that it's a horseshoe. Yes, I'm feeling an emotion towards you, but it's the complete polar opposite emotion. That emotion is hate, it's repugnance, because you are the antithesis. You're the exact opposite of who I am. Right? If there's someone that you love, their nemesis, you'll hate. And the stronger you love that person, the more you'll hate their nemesis. Now, so that is the complete tzaddik. They've completely eradicated any vestige, any semblance, any hint of evil within them, of the sitra achra, of the animal inclination within them, and therefore the only thing that's left in them is very, very strong emotions of love towards God and hatred and repulsion towards anything else. Continuing in the middle of page 6, the incomplete tzaddik is he who does not hate the sitra achra, the spiritual klippos, with an absolute hatred. Therefore, he does not find evil, physical desires and pleasures, absolutely repugnant. Because he still has some of it within him. He can still relate to it. It's never a factor in his life, but it's still there. As long as his hatred and horror to people are not absolute, perforce he must have retained some vestige of love and pleasure towards it. There must be somewhere hidden deep within him, there is that love still there. It never surfaces, it's never a factor, it's never a temptation, but it's there. He hasn't eradicated it. He hasn't transformed it. And that's why, in the action of his life and the love of God, he doesn't feel the difference. It's in the repulsion to everything else that the incomplete tzaddik feels that difference. The filthy garments which the animal soul has been clothed, meaning as explained above, the evil inclination and the lusting after worldly pleasures have obviously not been completely shed from it. Therefore, too, the evil of the animal soul has not completely been converted to good, since it has some hold on the filthy garments, i.e. the desire for pleasure, in which the animal soul has previously clothed and expressed itself.
And it can come back like Elisha ben Aboya became an apostate.
That's an interesting question, right? If it's still there, can it come back? And the answer is that generally speaking, of course, people have free will. And in fact, we say the stronger the person, the holier the person, the holier the free will. And the stronger the free will, and therefore the stronger the temptation. And so there is a question here about could a tzaddik, once a tzaddik has destroyed the inclination, how could they go back? And generally speaking, we understand it that it's an external, God-given flash of, what's the opposite of inspiration? A God-given flash of the opposite of inspiration that tempts them and can pull them back because internally they've conquered their desires. Internally, they no longer have the same temptations that we have. They still have free will, they still could sin, and yes, you do have, right, you still have, I will also say, we don't necessarily know that Elisha ben Avoya, who's a famous sage in the Talmud, who was extremely learned, and then he flipped to the other side, and he became a heretic, and he became a sinner. We don't know that necessarily he's a tzaddik. We also know from other parts of the Talmud that the Talmud tells us specifically, never have faith in yourself until the day you die. Never be like, I've accomplished my mission, I'm good. Because there was a great Kohen Gadol, and a Kohen Gadol, the best barometer of how spiritual and how holy a person is being a high priest. Because once a year the high priest entered the Holy of Holies. Now the thing about the Holy of Holies was that it was like touching live electricity. If you weren't the right person going into the Holy of Holies, you weren't around anymore. In fact, in the Second Temple, there was an idea of people were bribing the Roman government to become, I want to be appointed high priest. And so it was so prominent that their life would end on Yom Kippur when they would go into the Holy of Holies that they started walking in with a chain around their leg that they could be yanked out. Now, there was a whole positive spin to that even though they knew the cost, being the opportunity of being the high priest and serving the Jewish people was still a very strong. I mean, the whole different discussion. But absolutely, being a tzaddik does not mean your story is over. You still have light, but the Alter Rebbe doesn't go into too much more detail because this is not the book for tzaddikim. This is not the manual. This is not the life manual for tzaddikim. It's the manual for the Beinanim, which we'll get into starting in chapter 12. But for now, we will continue, and I want to just. Is it okay if we go a couple minutes over?
Yes.
Is it okay if we go a couple minutes over?
Yes.
Okay. We have the first half of this chapter is we'll continue reading on page 7, and then I'll summarize what the end of the chapter is going to be about, and we'll read through it. Page 7. Ella shehu batul miyutei kolachshav. You haven't destroyed, the incomplete tzaddik hasn't destroyed the evil, except that this vestige of evil is imperceptible and cannot express itself in evil desires, etc., because the evil is nullified in the good by reason of its minuteness and is counted as nothing, i.e. the overwhelming predominance of good prevents the evil from being sensed and from finding expression. Indeed, therefore, he's called tzaddik virale, which literally means a tzaddik, a righteous person, virale, who has wickedness. Here we're saying that the wickedness is to him, meaning it's subjugated, it's completely under the control of him, which means not only a tzaddik who retains evil, but also a tzaddik whose evil is his, i.e. subjugated and surrendered to him, to the good within him. Such a tzaddik is identified with the good, since he is overwhelmingly good. Perforce then, the fact that he retains some evil indicates that a love for God is not complete, for the complete love of God would have converted all the evil within him to good. Therefore, he is called an incomplete tzaddik. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to continue to explain that there are gradations to this level of tzaddik, especially tzaddik virale. A tzaddik that has subjugated the evil, conquered and vanquished the evil, there are different levels to how much that evil is vanquished. According to all of them, it's vanquished, right? It's no longer a factor in his life, but how much is it not a factor? How much does it not, how little is left? There are gradations. As the Alter Rebbe continues, V'hinei madregazu mischalekes l'rivavos madreges be'inyan bechinas miut harav anishar me'achar sme'arba sedesurim. Now, this level, that of the incomplete tzaddik who knows evil, is subdivided into myriads of levels consisting of various degrees of the quality of the minute remaining evil deriving from any of the four elements which the animal soul is comprised. Chapter 1, this is, again, we keep on brushing up against this idea of the four building blocks, spiritually speaking, of creation, how there's earth.
Can I close that door?
Yeah, sure.
That's not where the noise is coming
Yeah.
from.
Huh?
That's not where the noise is coming from.
It's from the kitchen.
From the kitchen. They might want the door open if they...
Because somebody wants to listen.
Yes. Well, once the... So, the idea of the four building blocks of creation, it's a deep Kabbalistic idea. We're not going to get into it again. But very basically, these four foundations are the source of four different, of all of our good and bad parts of us. Right? Laziness comes from the foundation of earth, that heaviness. Wasting time is from air, nothingness. Jealousy, anger is from fire, that passion, and temptations of physical desires comes from the water from which everything grows. That's basically the idea. So all of these four foundations have ways that they can have, we'll call them evil inclinations that sprout from them. But the common denominator of all of the tzaddikim, of all the tzaddiks, is that they vanquish their evil inclination. It's conquered, but it's still there. Now, how little is there? Well, that depends. Going back to the example we said earlier about if you have a little bit of meat, a little bit of milk in a big pot, so we said the basic ratio is always 60. That's when it becomes nullified. But it can also be, you could have a 1,000-ounce pot with 1 ounce of milk. You can have endless amounts of gradation in how nullified that milk is. As the Alter Rebbe continues, on page 8, the subdivision also takes into account the degree to which the remaining evil is nullified because of its minuteness. Whether 60 times as much good, for example, or in 1,000 or 10,000. These various sublevels in the ranks of incomplete tzaddikim are the levels of the numerous tzaddikim found in old generations, all of which belong to the category of the incomplete tzaddik. A generation can have many people like this. Many tzaddikim, many righteous people who have completely vanquished and are no longer at all under the control of their evil inclination. As we find in the Gemara, 18,000 tzaddikim stand before the Holy One, blessed be He. Right? One generation can have 18,000 tzaddikim. Now we'll understand in a moment what's the novelty in that statement. Because as you climb the ranks, especially when you get to the complete tzaddik, there are no 18,000 of them. We're talking a couple per generation. As the Alter Rebbe continues, on page 9, Achal Mailas Tzaddik Gomer, Husha Amar Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Re'isi B'nei Aliyah V'hemu Atim. But concerning the rank of the complete tzaddik, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's statement applies, I have seen superior men, B'nei Aliyah, and they are but few. So complete tzaddik, one who has transformed the evil, we're talking about a very, very small handful per generation. Incomplete tzaddik, who's vanquished, but no longer, but it still exists, there could be many, many more. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to continue from here to the end of the chapter. It gets a little bit more nuanced and, we'll say, Kabbalistical. And so, with everyone's permission, I'll explain it, we'll read it, we'll go through it, but we're not going to dwell on these ideas because it's sort of, again, this belongs in the life manual for a tzaddik and exactly what they accomplish and what they don't accomplish, and spiritually speaking, those different levels. And especially because we're already 5 minutes over time, we won't take too long in getting lost in the weeds of this discussion. God willing, when we do the next cycle of Tanya in a couple let's say years, we'll come back and we'll revisit this chapter and these ideas more in depth from a firmer grasp of the Kabbalistical concepts. But the Alter Rebbe starts off by that word superior men, B'nei Aliyah. What does that mean? So Alter Rebbe is going to give two explanations what that means. And one, the word Aliyah could mean uplifting, rising up. And so the first reason why they're called B'nei Aliyah is because they have uplifted every single part of their psyche. Why are they called, right? The literal translation is, better people, uplifted people. But the Alter Rebbe is going to translate, they're called uplifted people because they have uplifted and transformed every single part of themselves. The reason the complete tzaddik are called B'nei Aliyah, literally men of ascent, is that they converted evil and made it ascend into holiness. As it is similarly written in the introduction to the Zohar, there's a whole story there, how Rabbi Chia missed his teacher, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He missed him terribly. And so he fasted and begged and fasted and begged, and finally he was allowed to access Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. This is talking about after his teacher had passed on, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And so he begged and fasted and prayed for the opportunity to be reunited with his teacher. And finally, he was given that opportunity, but there were very severe limits. It seems like he was transported physically into the spiritual realm, but he was warned, don't look, don't touch, don't talk. You're just here to examine. Why? Because, as written in the introduction to the Zohar, that Rabbi Chia wished to ascend to the Heichel, heavenly shrine of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he heard a voice come out and say, Man minkain di chashena mahapchel nehede v'tamim mirin lemasika ad lo yesin hachachulu. Whichever of you, before coming here, have converted the darkness of the world to light and transformed the bitter taste of the animal soul and evil inclination to sweetness, only these may enter. That's the first reason called B'nei Aliyah. Because only once they've transformed everything, including their animal soul, they haven't just vanquished it, they've ascended it, they've transformed it, then that's a complete tzaddik. Another reason why they're called B'nei Aliyah is there's another nuance here about when you do good. You're doing a mitzvah, you're serving God. But why are you serving God? Are you serving God because you want to serve God? Or are you serving God for the sole purpose that God needs to be served? I am not even a factor. An incomplete tzaddik, because they still have that vestige of selfishness in them, it doesn't influence them. It can't tell them to do something wrong, but they still, part of them is serving God because I want to serve God. I want to connect to God. That word I still exists.
You can't say God needs to be served, right? Because God doesn't need anything.
So we've touched on this before. Fast. When we say God needs to be served, I'll change that. God made himself need to be served. We'll phrase it like that. Of course, intrinsically, God doesn't need anything, but God invented a need to be served. God invented the need for mitzvahs. God invented the need for Torah learning. Does he actually need it? No. Does he want to need it? Or even that's a word that gets me in trouble. Did he make himself need it? Yes. And so the question becomes, am I serving God because I want to connect? Because I want to become more spiritual? Because I want to be holier? That's incredible. It's amazing. Halavai, the Yiddish word, like if only we would all reach to that level. But a complete tzaddik serves God 100% for God's reasons. And because of that, sometimes there can be a battle of my own spiritual development or doing what God wants. Usually those are completely aligned. But there could be specific cases where they're not aligned. And a complete tzaddik is able to give up their own spiritual development, their own spiritual continuation, their own spiritual growth for something that God wants. As he continues, another reason for the designation is B'nai Aliyah, which means men of above, men of ascent. Even their divine service in the area of doing good in the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs is for the sake of above. And the service directed towards the most high level, towards the loftiest level. Their divine service is not intended merely to attach themselves to God by serving God through Torah mitzvah so as to quench the thirst of their soul, which thirsts for God. Page 10. Thirsty people go to water. Spiritually thirsty people turn to God. As is written, Ho explains the prophet, all who thirst for godliness should go to the water of Torah. Let them read your Torah, which is likened to water. As explained elsewhere, the thirsty ones refer to those who thirst for godliness. So you're thirsty physically, go to the water fountain. You're thirsty spiritually, turn to God. But you're still turning to God to quench your own thirst. A B'nai Aliyah, a true complete tzaddik, turns to God to quench their thirst completely, not to quench their thirst, completely because God wants it. It's not about them. It's about drinking water because the water needs to be drank, in that analogy, which obviously doesn't make sense. And that most high complete level is expressed in Tikkunim, the Tikkunei Zehar. Rather, their service of God, as in the Tikkunei Zehar explains, that which the sages have said, who is a pious one, a chassid, who is benevolent towards his creator. The Tikkunei comments that kono, usually translated as creator, can be interpreted as his nest, derived from the word ken, nest, and thus the chassid is benevolent with his nest, i.e. his source, God. This benevolence towards God consists, on page 11, of uniting the Holy One, blessed be He, with the Shekhinah, so that the light of this union reach and be felt in those parts of the world. Right, going back to the question, God doesn't need us, right? God doesn't need anything, but God invented a need. And by God invented a need is that He created two distinct energies. God created His own presence, Himself exists, and then there is the Shekhinah, God's divine presence. And our role in this world is to do mitzvos to reunite those two things. Again, this is the whole spiritual conversation about what exactly the mechanisms are and what's happening here, which we'll leave on the side for now. But suffice it to say that God created a need for us to do mitzvos. And because of that, when we do a mitzvah, we connect to God. Are we doing it for ourselves to quench our own thirst? Completely valid and good. Don't get me wrong. A complete tzaddik, it's not about him. It's 100% about accomplishing God's needs and God's desires. And an example of this that we might experience, hopefully, is when children do things for their parents just because their parents need it. 100% because the parent needs something done, needs to go, parent need a prescription picked up from the pharmacy. Now, the child could be doing that because I love my parent and I want to express my love in a certain way, or it could be completely because they need something done. It's not about me, right? If it was just about me expressing my love for my parent, I would want to go give them a hug.
They just want to please.
So
Parent may not need anything.
in that case, it's about me. I want to please. I want to do something. If it's about my parents, then I'll do whatever is needed. God invented a need of this reunion. Our parents have certain needs. Those are both doing them for the need to be done, not because of my own desire to connect or to please or to be involved. As he continues on page 11, as it explained in Rayim Nehemna and Parshas Kitetse, in a manner of a son who exerts himself for a father and mother, whom he loves more than himself, more than his own nefesh, ruach, and neshama, more than his own soul. And who sacrifices his life for their sake to redeem them, they should they be held in captivity, as also explained somewhere else. The ultimate expression of it's not about me, it's about them, is the fact that what if that choice is stark? What if it's a choice of me or them? If it's about I want to please my parents, I want to give them something, I want to love them, well, if it comes down to a life question, my life, what I want is still the central theme here. And therefore I'd be more hesitant to do that. But if it's about them, what they need, not about how much I want to please them, not about how I want to have a relationship, I want to be involved, it's about them, what do they need? Then I'll give everything, my free time, my not so free time, and even my life to accomplishing that goal. So, what we've just discussed is the Alter Rebbe gave two expressions, two reasons why a complete tzaddik, the ultimate version of someone who has not only vanquished but conquered and transformed his evil, is called B'nai Aliyah, people of ascent. Because they, first of all, because they've ascended every part of their life, and also it's all about what's on high. Everything revolves around God. On page 12, as you can see, it's in brackets. It gets very Kabbalistical here. So if you'll forgive me, we'll translate the words, but I'm not going to get into explaining it because it's way beyond the scope of this class and really beyond my understanding as well at this point. But the Alter Rebbe explains how both of these are connected, because one leads to the other, and by doing one, you've accomplished the other one as well. Page 12, both interpretations are complementary. For by refining the good found in Klipas Nega, as the men of ascent do by converting their animal soul, which is derived from Klipas Noga, to good, one elevates feminine waters, which is called man, affecting unions in the higher realms so as they cause masculine waters, mad, to descend to this world. The masculine waters are the waters of kindness that flow into and are contained into each of the 248 positive commandments, which are all natures of kindness or benevolence and masculine waters. The term masculine waters, as applied to mitzvahs, means that mitzvahs draw God's holiness from above, i.e. the highest realms downward, so that God's holiness be clothed and revealed within the lowest realms, i.e. physical, that's been elsewhere. Thus, the two interpretations of the term men of ascent are complementary. What does that mean? That's a great question. Essentially, the Alter Rebbe is saying one leads to the other, and by constantly transforming everything, it's all about God, and then God returns the favor and bestows His benevolence upon this world. We're not going to do that anymore. So, what's the big idea of chapter 10? There's a lot of details that we discussed, a lot of back and forth, a lot of nuance. The answer, what chapter 10 is talking about is option 1. You have like some of these choose your own adventure books. You have the battle. Now what happens? Option 1 that we've discussed is the outcome known as the tzaddik. The tzaddik is someone who is victorious. They win the war, not just the battle, they win the war. The evil is vanquished. The wickedness, the selfishness within them no longer is a factor in their life. And therefore, they never sin. They're never tempted to sin. Now, the Alter Rebbe got into some nuance about how strong that conquering was. How much have they transformed? Is it complete, or is it nullified, or is it transformed? The difference being, how much am I disgusted of the things that are against God? As promised, for one more minute, what does it have to do with me? My ending is not going to be the tzaddik ending. I know that already. I'm well enough into my life to know that I'm going to struggle, and as we'll learn Tanya further, we'll see, I'm going to struggle, I'm going to be in this battle for the rest of my life. I'm going to be in this war for the rest of my life, and every battle is going to be a battle. What does this have to do for me? So again, the tzaddik represents the completion. But for us, every single battle can have this story over. The war won't have this ending for us, but every battle will. Right? A war is made up of a lot of different battles. The war is over, means everything is done, the story is over, you've won. But battles go back and forth. Battles is, lots of battles make up a war. And for us, while we don't necessarily have this ending to the war, we could have this ending for individual battles. And I could decide that certain parts of my life, certain things that used to tempt me, I could hopefully outgrow them. As I'll discuss later, if it's our life mission, then, if my life mission is to be tempted by non-kosher cheesecake, then I'll never overcome that temptation because that is my life battle, right? I specifically like to choose a very benign, very... Rabbi Josh Gordon, who also gives Tanya Class, gave blessed memory, his example always is, if my temptation is to rob the Bank of England, right? Something very, very neutral, very abstract. We don't want to attack anyone sitting around this table. But if that's my life mission, then I'll continue to struggle with it. But there are parts of my life that I could become repulsed by. There are evil in my life. There are factors that I could be so filled of love to God that certain things disgust me. Sinning, actively sinning, the idea of walking into an idol worship shop and buying an idol, that idea disgusts me. Now, the fact is that going to someone's house and stealing something doesn't disgust me because it's all about nuance. I'm a Beinoni, I struggle. Every battle is its own story. But the ideas of a tzaddik, about conquering, vanquishing, and ultimately transforming the evil is something we can all experience, hopefully, at least in the micro, if not in the macro. At least in some parts of our life, even if it's not the ultimate ending to our story. And that is the story of chapter 10. God willing, next week we'll continue chapter 11, where we'll swing to the opposite extreme. What happens when our godly soul loses this war? See you all then. Thank you all for joining.
Does Chabad consider the Rebbe, maybe all the Rebbes, complete tzaddik?
The answer is yes, but we also don't go through life measuring other people's status. Now, the reason why it's important to know who isn't is because the tzaddikim have a role in inspiring us and connecting us, right? Because godliness is such an important factor of their life, because godliness is their whole life, their connection to God, which we all have a connection to God. One of the biggest misconceptions about Hasidic life is that we connect to God through a Rebbe, which is not true. We all have a direct connection to God. But a tzaddik whose entire life is unobstructed godliness, they have an interference-free relationship. They have the ability to inspire us in ways that we couldn't necessarily inspire ourselves. And that's why, yes, of course, the Rabbeim, the great Torah leaders, the great Hasidic masters, they're tzaddikim. Why does that affect my life? I'm not keeping tabs on everyone else. It's important to us because now I know who to connect to, who to learn from, who to be inspired by tzaddikim. So, yeah.
I think it's very beautiful that I was allowed to come here on this chapter because we had just finished purpose.
Absolutely.
And so the connection is very clear to me. And it's also very clear to me that the moment to moment to moment in this is similar to the moment to moment of the other.
Absolutely. Just wait till we get to chapter 12 and you'll see it's really all about the moment to moment to moment.
So I got really lucky.
Yes, absolutely. That's it. We discussed that as well. Nothing is accidental. Everything is exactly planned.
You're a tzaddik, yes.
I am.
Of course.
I
Now
am barely here, honey. I'm barely
We're all
here.
barely.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's great. Great to see everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so tell me, do people go online and become, say that I want to come to this and pay
This
for that?
class is open. There's no charge. This is one of our classes that we have.
I see,
available to everyone.
but you prefer to be acknowledged at the end of the class or the early or
Not
whatever?
specifically. What I will do is I will end this recording. I will add you.